Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to wyomingpbs.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
I was so intrigued by the people and just absolutely fascinated by their faces. I was just really attracted to their faces, and I just started doing portraits. You look at these black and white pictures and you don't see the color in people's dresses or the colors in people's shirts. What you're seeing is the form of the picture and the bodies of the people or the shape of the face. It's like distilling ideas from a visually chaotic situation.
Driving down the road out west, and the wheels are singing a song about how Wyoming's just a little old town with streets extremely long. Down the road, another main street, never the same street. Last chance road, back gate closed, wheels won't turn. Well, you got your feet down another main street.
Anyone who has spent time in a darkroom knows that photography is a form of alchemy. First, a box with a lens is pointed at a subject. A black strip of celluloid comes out of the box. Light shines through it, a blank sheet of paper is immersed in a chemical bath, and an image emerges. It's an old form of darkroom magic which may disappear in a world of digital technology. But through the work of Sara Wiles, it has saved another world from disappearing, a community of elders and traditional people on the Wind River Indian Reservation.
It was really hard for me to go into public situations, like say a powwow or some other kind of activity or a meeting, and start taking pictures, because I didn't know how people would react to me or if I should even be doing that. I started doing a lot of those portraits, and I think it was because I was so intrigued by the people and just absolutely fascinated by their faces. I was just really attracted to their faces, and I just started doing portraits.
Sara would always be carrying a camera around, and I wasn't aware that she was, a real photographer, say, but she took a lot of pictures, and people were friendly, toward her and felt comfortable. Sara was really hesitant about exhibiting her photographs because she did not know how the people would feel. And what I explained to Sara was that I thought it was important. The way she photographed them, it was, in a natural setting in their homes, and that's where they felt comfortable, was in their homes.
My friend Merle Haas, who's an Arapaho, asked me to display some things in the American Indian Studies Department at the University of Wyoming. And when I put that show together, I think that was 1991, that was really the first time that I exhibited pictures. There were, I think, 33 pictures in that show, all black and white, most of them portraits, fairly close-up portraits.
So I went over and saw her presentation and saw her slides, and then eventually we just got together at her home in Lander, and I was just amazed at the amount of material she had. She started bringing things out of her storage area and kind of spreading things out on the dining room table, and just incredibly amazed at the numbers of photographs she'd taken and the overall quality of them. The interesting stories she had to tell about them. Well, I was interested in putting together an exhibition that could travel to small communities, to small museums and libraries, places around the state, that would just inform the public a little bit more about the lives of people at Wind River. And so Sara's photographs were perfect for that idea. I just started receiving inquiries from other places. We went to the Newberry Library in Chicago, which is a very prestigious institution. They have their own photography collection of the great historical photographs. We went to places like the University of Montana Art Museum in Missoula.
That really got around. That particular exhibit really got around.
But before the exhibits and the acclaim, there was a childhood back home in Indiana.
I often think that one of the reasons that I've been able to work on the reservation is because of where I grew up. I grew up in a really small town. It was in a small county, Ripley County, Indiana. That was a pretty poor county. There wasn't a lot of obvious wealth in the county. And people were still real traditional. The people who lived in that county, their families had lived there for hundreds of years, a lot of them. My family moved in there as early as 1810. My family homesteaded where there was an Indian tribe living along the banks of the creek outside of town, you know. And all my family on both sides go back to the early 1800s in this one little county. And it wasn't just my family that was like that. A lot of the families were like that. When I was growing up, my dad really liked photography. He was sort of an amateur photographer. He did color slides. He didn't do any of his own processing. And we always had cameras around. We always had little brownies. I just started doing that at a really early age. And then I do remember in high school we used to have slideshows. My dad and I would take pictures of, you know, some activity or something with all the kids in the neighborhood or the kids in the class, and we'd have little slideshows. It totally bored everybody, I'm sure. I started taking pictures of my friends at college, at IU, you know, and that kind of thing. Just was sort of playing around with it, seeing what happened with it. I was in graduate school in anthropology at Indiana University, and I signed up to do a field summer session in Colombia, South America, and my advisor said, "Now be sure and bring a camera or two," and I said, "Camera or two?" So I took two of my dad's 35mm cameras along and did both color and black and white. I had really good luck with it right from the start. I think maybe that's what intrigued me with it was, wow, I got some really good pictures down here, you know.
In the middle of her academic career, Sara Wiles signed up for a stint with the VISTA program, a kind of domestic Peace Corps, and came to Wyoming for the first time.
I lived in Rock Springs for a year as a VISTA volunteer. You know, I've seen people come out here, and they, from the east mostly, who, you know, they come out here and they're sort of overwhelmed by the wide open spaces and the mud or the dust or whatever. And I never had that reaction. I loved it immediately. I even liked Rock Springs. I loved Rock Springs. Rock Springs is a very interesting community. I knew I loved Wyoming, so I applied for a job and got a job as a social worker. It was a state social services, but it was on the reservation. I had always been very interested in working on an Indian reservation, but I basically knew nothing about any specific tribes or anything.
Sara moved to Lander on the south border of the Wind River Indian Reservation. She married another social worker, Steve Wiles, and they started a family. But that would not be her only family.
One of the programs that we had that I worked with as a social worker was called the Homemaker Program. We were to hire women to help the elderly.
I started looking for a job and found this job here as a homemaker. And I thought, well, I don't have much education, so I think I'm more experienced doing, you know, what I do for old people and stuff. So, because I kept my dad and my uncle, and I did things for them. We did a lot of good things to the old people, and Sara was right there. My sisters and I she started coming out to our place. We invited her. We always invite, people we know. And we'd invite her, and my sisters got acquainted with her, my daughters, my family. They just all know Sara. She's just like one of us today. And because anything we do or say, we have to call her up, and she come, we go over and cry on her shoulder, this and that. And she's just one of the family.
She became our sister, she was part of the family. My uncle, Ralph Grasshopper, gave her an Indian name. And up to now, she's with us all the time, and we we don't see her Sara Wiles, photographer or, anthropologist or whatever title she has, she's our sister.
My folks were real controlling, and I know a lot of people who are real controlling of their kids. And, the Indian families give their kids lots of space to sort of grow in and experiment in, I think. Yet they're always surrounded. It's not like they're turned out on their own. I don't mean that. They're always surrounded by a large extended family. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that. The Moss family has been my family. I knew them before I even met my husband, and she adopted me. That relationship continued to this day. The things I learned from observing Indian families on the reservation affected the way I raised my own children.
But even before her own children were born, Sara was beginning to capture the faces of the Arapaho people she worked with.
I started doing those portraits early on, probably about the same time, about 1975, 76, when we were working on the Homemakers program. I started doing a lot of those portraits, and I think it was because I was so intrigued by the people and just absolutely fascinated by their faces. I was just really attracted to their faces, and I just started doing portraits. They were very kind and very welcoming and invited me into their house with the Homemaker program and pictures that we did, and then later to do their portraits. And Gladys Moss was especially encouraging of me to come in and do pictures of the elders of her family.
They all were always willing to have their pictures taken. And she's got a lot of people that are not living today that she took pictures of that once we worked for down Arapaho in this area. And that's how she got close to the community. She wasn't a stranger to them.
The people out here are very sharing, with what little they may have. Sara was very accepting of the humble lifestyles of the people out here, and that I think that was really important. She respected their quietness. She respected the way they conducted themselves in their homes to one another, and she didn't try to change the people, and I think that was really important.
A lot of the people on the reservation, most of the people on the reservation have very plain homes, and it's because one of their values is you don't show off. You don't show off your wealth. You don't show off your material surroundings, because those kind of things aren't important.
Then she'd give them a copy of their pictures. I think mostly that's what they liked, get a copy of their pictures. And she's got some hung up at our Senior Citizen Center, and probably here and there.
A lot of people didn't own, cameras and at that time, and so it was really appreciative when all they had was the memories, and Sara had the pictures, the photographs that she generously gave to the families.
It's really interesting that she's both doing this kind of community service that's really being used by the people on the reservation, as well as kind of the external viewpoint that seems to be very appealing to European Americans as well. When Sara is taking someone's photograph, obviously that's about as personal as you can get in terms of getting someone's face and their image, and then she asks them about their own life. So, people are understandably a little bit more careful, potentially, or more reluctant to have that kind of information taken away out of their control off the reservation. I think it's a tribute to her that she's earned as much trust as she has.
Sara's presence and her camera are taken for granted on the reservation now. And she keeps it simple. No huge lenses, no giant tripods, no bells and whistles.
This and one other just like it are the two cameras that I've used since the early 1980s. I think we bought one in 1980 and maybe one in 1981. They're Canon F1s. They're just a really reliable, sturdy old 35mm camera. And this is all I've ever used. I have 2 lenses that are actually 3 lenses that I use when taking photos on the reservation or anywhere, and that's all I've got. I'm really pretty simple. I work just about every day. I usually work in the morning in the dark room for 3 or 4 hours, sometimes more, or else I spend the morning on the reservation. I do try to keep things as simple as possible. I try to keep things as simple as possible with chemicals and with paper. I'm not somebody who experiments a lot in terms of getting new equipment and getting new filters and getting new toys. This is an enlarger I bought at a garage sale in 1974, the year after I moved here, for $100. But I really like it. It's as simple as it gets, is as plain as it gets. It gives a pretty clear, sharp picture, except it does fall out a little on the edges like a lot of enlargers do, so I have to compensate for that. But it's a little old thing. Leave it in there less than a minute, and it comes just to see what you get. This is the developer over here. This is the stop bath that stops the action of the fixer, of the developer, and then it goes directly into the fixer. And then after that you can turn the light on and you can look at it and see what you have.
As Sara's reputation has grown, she sometimes finds herself sharing gallery space with the great historic photographers of Native Americans. Flattering and humbling, but she also finds, sometimes, she has issues with them.
I think most people who take pictures in Native American communities, whether they're Native people themselves or whether they're outsiders coming in, have to bounce off Curtis, Edward Curtis, because he's so famous and his portraits are so famous. Edward Curtis took photographs between approximately 1900 and 1930 in Native American communities. He had a monumental project. It resulted in 20 volumes of photos, and these portraits are iconic. They're famous. After being forgotten for 30 years in the 1960s, they came back into style, and you see them everywhere now. They're very famous. I have trouble with Curtis. A lot of people have trouble with Curtis, but I have trouble with Curtis because his photos are so decontextualized. Most of them don't even have people's names attached. You know, he'll have a title. He'll have a sort of a corny description.
And so, as she deepens her understanding of the choices a photographer makes and the power of pictures, her own approach is changing.
One more. Over the years, I've gone less from doing portraits into a more documentary form that is hopefully still artistic and appealing to people, but yet gives more context. So people who are viewing these pictures, they're not just embodied pictures of people hanging on a wall. They're actually living human beings who live in a certain way and in a certain time and in a certain place. That's different from mainstream America.
When Sara began sorting through her thousands of pictures for a book project, it increased her concern for the context of her subjects.
I have looked at hundreds of photography books, many of them books taken in Native American communities. None of them seemed to fit a model that would work for the photographs that I was doing and what I was trying to do in terms of contextualizing things. And when I started interviewing people to get more information to put with the pictures, that's when things changed. Things really changed. Right then they changed, and quickly. Because I realized I was getting wonderful life stories from people. Not just when people were born, not just when people died, not just what political office they had, but really intimate, interesting, funny, and sad stories about their lives. And they wouldn't fit in a caption.
There's no one else who really comes out here on a regular basis and tries to get lots of different people, lots of different ceremonies, and also get the cultural information behind the pictures. And I realized it was a fantastic way that I can use to show my students what it's actually like on this reservation. The photographs and the text that went with them captured better than anything else I've ever seen exactly what goes on up here.
What I've done is write more and more. And I'm not a writer, I'm not comfortable writing. But I felt these people's stories had to be told.
When it comes to context, one of Sara's subjects, Janie Brown, provides it in abundance.
Janie. I got to know Janie when she became the cook at the Senior Citizen Center. See, I always go to the Senior Citizen Center for lunch. You know, that's where you find out everything that's going on in the community. The elders come in there, get to visit with everybody. So I always go to the senior citizens for lunch when I'm on the reservation. And Janie started cooking there about 10 or 12 years ago, and I got to know her. And she would always bring her beadwork to work. So over the years, I've watched her bead absolutely incredible things. Everything from Mickey Mouse moccasins to full beaded dresses.
The result is not a single photo, but a series. Not a caption, but an essay.
Janie was born Elizabeth Jane Wallowing Bull in 1953 and spent her first 11 years living in a frame tent next to her grandpa's log home near Ethity. It had a dirt floor, a wood frame around the bottom, a tent covering all of it, and a wood stove. Her grandpa would shovel the snow to the road so the children wouldn't get their feet wet when going to school. She lived with other relatives for a while after that and attended a local elementary school.
Having a good meal. Grilled cheese sandwiches.
They're all
tomato
good
soup.
here.
They're all
Janie
good.
Brown enjoys this.
5 days a week, every week of the year, Janie Brown makes over 100 meals. Some are distributed as Meals on Wheels to shut-ins, but most are served at the Ethity Senior Citizen Center to elders who come not only to eat, but also to visit friends and catch up on community news. Janie arrives early and works through the morning to be ready for the 11:30 serving hour. In between stirring pots of soup and checking roasts and making bread, she catches a few minutes to bead. In mid-afternoon, when her workday is done, she goes home and beads some more. Janie's lifelong Indian name is Benito, hollering all around.
Beginning of time. One time my granddaughter said, "How old are you, Grandma?" It was my birthday, and I said, "Gee, Chelsea, I think I'm old as the hills and twice as dirty." She didn't think that was too funny.
When the book is completed, and 2 years into it she will not rush the process, it may also be the end of a chapter in her career.
I have a sense that in some ways maybe my work on the reservation in terms of taking pictures and documenting the life is kind of winding up. I've been doing it since 1974. I think I'm kind of getting burned out. I think people are getting really tired of seeing me come around and bother them a lot of times. I jokingly say that I'm going to retire and photograph trees. With trees, I don't need to go out and get releases from 20 people for every picture, and it's a lot easier. I'd like to continue with the infrared photography. I really like working with the infrared. I have a fantasy of returning to my hometown in Indiana and doing kind of the same thing there that I've done on the reservation.
The photographer Diane Arbus once said, "I really believe there are things nobody would see if I didn't photograph them." Back on the Wind River Indian Reservation, Sara Wiles' photographs of the old people will be seen by their descendants and by us, as the old people wanted to be seen and remembered.